الجنرال جوزيف فوتيل القائد السابق للقيادة المركزية الأميركية عمل ل4 عقود في الجيش الأميركي وتولى مناصب قيادية خلال حروب خاضتها بلاده وتحالفات عملت على صيانتها. يتحدث للمجلة عن ملامح الحروب الجديدة وتعزيز الدور الأميركي في الشرق الأوسط، ويحذر من استخدام الإرهابيين للذكاء الاصطناعي والمسيرات.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with المجلة. It is a pleasure to have you.
Good. I'm glad to join you. Thank you.
So, as we agreed, we're going to cover mainly, the drones, missiles, and in a way, the U.S. role in Middle East and in the world, if that is okay.
Sure.
As we know, at the beginning of the Ukraine war, there was this assumption that drones could be very effective because the Ukrainians used the drones to neutralize the Russians in Ukraine. But then on 13th and 14th of April, when the Iranians attacked Israel with about more than 330 drones and missiles, then they were not very effective. So there was the counter theory. What do you think? How effective drones and missiles are?
Well, thank you. I think drones and missiles are very, very effective, and they're a serious threat that we have to always be prepared for. I think there's a couple different things to consider here. Certainly in April, when the Iranians attempted to use drones and missiles against Israel, they went up against a very sophisticated air defense system that was not only belonged to the Israelis, but to the Americans and to some other, other partners in the region. So that's very, very sophisticated. They have the ability to detect, and then they have a lot of assets that can be used to stop those types of attacks and do it very, very effectively. This may not necessarily have been the case that we've always seen in Ukraine or in other places where there isn't an effective defensive measure and a willingness to use all the resources that you have to defeat this threat. So while I think the lesson from the April incident is the importance of air defense, but I don't think any of that minimizes the threat of drones and missiles. I consider them to be a very, very serious threat that we must always consider.
You are the expert, sir. We heard different theories whether the Iranians used the most sophisticated drones that they got. So what is the truth there?
Well, I would expect that they did. The Iranians employed a large number of missiles and drones, 300. That's considerable. I don't think that's everything that they have. I think they certainly have the ability to do more. But again, in the first ever state-on-state interchange back and forth between Israel and Iran, I have to believe that they were using their very best systems. So that's my belief in terms of this. But again, it came up against a very, very effective air defense architecture that was able to successfully defeat it. I don't know why it would be in Iran's interest to use something other than their very best systems.
But there are some people, just for the sake of argument, there were some people said, the Iranians did not want to cause big harm on Israel. They just wanted to test and to send a political message.
Well, I think they certainly accomplished that by testing that. But if they just wanted to probe and they just wanted to, kind of do the minimal amount so that they could message their people that they were responding, I think that could have been done with a lot less than 300 missiles and drones. I think the sheer volume of this, I think, really concerns me. My initial thought as I heard about this was exactly as you stated, that they're trying to probe, they're trying to do the minimum to respond here so they can communicate to their people. But then as I learned more about it and I learned the sheer volume of this, and I spoke with more and more people, I became convinced that I think that this was actually a serious threat that they intended to inflict some level of damage and harm onto Israel. So I just, it's hard for me to reconcile 300 missiles and drones and not consider that to be a very serious attack.
So would you say that this attack, 330 missiles and drones, that actually showed the gap, military gap between Israel and its allies and Iran and their allies?
Well, yeah, I think that it does. I think what actually demonstrates it even more is the Israeli counterstrike when they shot a limited number of missiles at critical locations in the vicinity of their nuclear facilities, and were able to penetrate through Iranian air defense. I think that's a that's a very clear indication that there are still some excuse me, some significant differences between both of these militaries.
So you, in a way, you are confident and convinced that the Israelis retaliated and attacked Asfahan, I think, in the middle of Iran.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable that that this current exchange that started on the 1st of April has largely been resolved now. I think the bigger issue, however, is that with kind of state-on-state attacks taking place, that is, Iran attempting to attack Israel and Israel counterstriking into Iran, I think this has raised the level of risk in the region, and hopefully not established a new red line that state-on-state attacks are an acceptable form. I'm hopeful that that the exchange that took place will move this back into an area that is of more acceptable risk for the region, and certainly for these two countries.
So, Mr. Votel, so would you say then we're back to the old rules of game, or new rules of game have been established after
Yeah,
this?
I think there's new rules. I think it is to be determined whether we have returned to the old rules or not. I think we're still in a place where we are trying to determine if there are actually new rules or whether we've actually returned to the old rules.
Which means, just to explain, which means, are we back to the proxy war, or we are now a new rule, which is direct conflict?
Yeah, the so-called shadow war or proxy war that takes place where they conduct operations outside of their own territory that are focused on one another. Yes, that's right.
What about, if we move a bit forward, what about the assassinations that the Israelis committed? I mean, they targeted several leaders of Hamas, whether in Gaza or whether in Lebanon, or some Iranian expert or officers in Syria. In terms of technology, we keep hearing about what's called like voice recognition. How important this new technology in terms of warfare?
Well, yeah, I think what we're learning over time is that technology has always made a difference in warfare, and I think that's the case. And these technologies, I won't go into too much detail on these. I don't know as much as I probably should, but I'm obviously familiar with it. But I think that technology can help be more precise. It can help be more accurate. It can help limit collateral effects, and it's a vulnerability that can be exploited. So I expect that we will continue to see the use of technology to help in these types of operations, whether they're kind of in the shadow or they're more linked to open combat, open conflict situations.
And we're hearing about AI being used in the war in Gaza.
Yeah, I would, yes, I would expect that the Israelis are using artificial intelligence. I would imagine that the Ukrainians and perhaps the Russians are using it as well. I mean, this is the coming technology here, and the ability to use artificial intelligence to sort through huge amounts of data to help identify targets and hopefully add to the accuracy and precision of those being targeted, I think, is definitely a trend that we're seeing in warfare.
So now, Mr. Votel, now we have drones, we have missiles, long-range missiles, and we have AI, we have voice recognition. So how those new technologies are going to affect the warfare in general, whether in the Middle East or the whole world?
Well, yes, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see more and more militaries, more and more nations trying to acquire these types of technologies and then figure out good ways of employing it in the military realm. And I think what you'll begin to see is more advancements in this area. One of the things I'm really concerned about is the linking of artificial intelligence and drones together. I think this is a very significant development that we have to pay very, very close attention to. In my country, of course, we're having a debate about artificial intelligence, and this extends into the professional military here about how we keep humans in the loop and make sure that humans are the decision makers in this. And I think that's very possible. I think it's very important to do that. But there's no doubt that the so-called cat is out of the bag here, and meaning that the technology is out there, people see what it can do, and now there's going to be an effort to try to acquire that, and it's good that effort to acquire it is going to extend to terrorist organizations. They're going to try to leverage that. That's the challenge of this. Artificial intelligence is out there. It's commercially available. People can acquire it, and so if modern militaries can use it, then certainly violent extremist organizations can use it as well. So this is, I think, the concern is the proliferation of it.
Maybe I'll come back to the question of terrorism, but that's, I think, very interesting. Could you please elaborate more about why you are concerned about this merge between AI and drones?
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely, because in my country, in the United States, as I mentioned, we have a serious debate about this, and I think the professional belief is that we, as military leaders, as humans, have a responsibility for the decisions that are being made by our forces and by our assets, and so there's a high probability that in the United States and modern militaries, Western militaries, that despite the use of artificial intelligence to help with kind of routine matters and targeting and stuff like that, that ultimately there'll be a human in the loop. My concern is that may not always be the case, especially as you look at violent extremist organizations, as you look at militaries that are not guided by the law of armed conflict, or adhering to keeping human military leaders in the loop. I could envision a time when, for example, the Russian military might use drones with artificial intelligence just to conduct operations in the Ukraine without concern for the effects of collateral damage or confirmatory information, so that they know the things they're looking at or they're going after are the things they want to go after. So I can definitely see where those who don't adhere to values, don't adhere to the international law regarding this, and don't exercise ethical oversight on it, could really take advantage of this to devastating effects, I think.
But if we use AI in drones, then who legally will be responsible for any crimes are being committed?
Well, I'll just answer for myself. I think if I was a military commander and the equipment, drones that I was using were using artificial intelligence or anything else, I would be responsible for that. I think there's a commander that is responsible, and that's what we're talking about here, is that there is even though you're relying on technology, there's a human, there's a leader who is actually responsible for that. That's the difference, I think, and it's one that I think we have to pay very, very close attention to.
As Mr. Votel, as you mentioned, right, just a few minutes ago, that the terrorist might be sitting somewhere and thinking about how they could use AI. You remember, like 20 years, 30 years ago, when the internet started, then we all were questioning, asking, how the terrorists would use internet, and they used internet. Then, how much concerned are you that about the terrorists somewhere? I mean, I know that you work very hard to fight ISIS. How much concerned you are about the terrorist or lone wolves could use AI in their terrorist attacks?
Oh, I'm absolutely concerned about this. I think one of the things that we learn from fighting against terrorist organizations over a long period of time is that these organizations are very savvy. They're very capable. They're always looking for an edge. They're always looking for opportunities to exploit vulnerabilities in our systems so that they can perpetrate their attacks. And I would expect that they would continue to do the same thing with drones and artificial intelligence. I mean, we've seen this with the use of, for example, social media. When you look at how ISIS employed social media to recruit and bring, tens of thousands of foreign fighters to Syria during the height of their campaign there. That's a good example of how they are leveraging that. So I have every expectation. I mean, look at ISIS-K and their ability to exploit vulnerabilities in the Russian migration system to get their fighters and operatives in place to perpetrate this horrendous attack that we just recently saw in Moscow. This is an example of the savviness and the efforts that violent extremist organizations will take, whether they are lone wolves who are acting on their own, or whether they are a more organized organization. I think we have to give them credit for being learning organizations and trying to exploit every opportunity that they have.
How should we get prepared for it? To this upcoming fight?
Well, I mean, when it comes to terrorists, I think we have to make sure that we don't take our eye off the ball on this. It's, the debate in our country, particularly in our national security, discussion forums here is our need and desire to focus on the threat of China, and that drives a lot of our decision making. But we can't allow that to allow us to take our eye off of terrorist organizations. So we have to make sure that our intelligence communities are attuned to this. We have to make sure that we have good relationships with our network of partners out there, so we are sharing information with them. We have to insist on protocols for advanced technology. We need to bring attention to companies and countries that are exploiting this type of technology and providing it to people that can use it for nefarious purposes. That has to be illuminated, and those people have to be exposed and held accountable for the things that they are doing. So there's a variety of things that we can do, but it starts with not forgetting to pay attention to this threat and thinking that it's not as important as other things.
What about Gaza, sir? I mean, just because you are the expert, I mean, the war have been going on now almost for more than 7 months, and it seems that until now the Israelis, I mean, did not achieve their goals. I mean, the announced goals, but at the same time, Hamas is not giving up. Until now, they are not accepting the ceasefire. I mean, from military perspective, how do you look at the Gaza war?
Yeah. Well, I think Israel is one that has to answer if they have achieved their goals. I do think that their military operations have 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 been successful in preventing Hamas from being an effective organization that can perpetrate attacks. That I think has been accomplished. I think my view here is that I think from the beginning we knew this was going to be an extraordinarily difficult fight. I mean, this is a very savvy enemy who operates in a labyrinth of underground tunnels and a whole system underground that they can operate on that mixes in among the population, that has a very powerful ideology that has continued to gain support not just locally but internationally. So I think we've known this is going to be a very difficult fight. I think one of the challenges that the Israelis have is that they don't have any partners on the ground who can assist them with this. So, for example, as they went through northern Gaza and in Gaza City, that operation, they moved on to other things. There wasn't anybody that could stay behind and help ensure security. So that's given the opportunity for Hamas to begin to return to those areas. So it's important that as they go through and clear these areas, that they actually hold them and they actually maintain control of them. And I think that's been a real challenge with this. Of course, the most important thing that we've seen that I think has contributed to this has been the humanitarian situation. There literally has been no place for the 2.4 million Palestinians to move to, and so they've been moving around inside Gaza. And this I think has been a very difficult challenge for the Israelis. They've been primarily focused on Hamas and have not always paid as much attention to the humanitarian situation. I think that's what you see from the leaders in my country right here. They are very concerned about that, and they acknowledge the need for Israel to go after Hamas, but they also understand the importance of taking care of the population. And it is important, I think, for Israel to operate in a way that begins to separate the population from Hamas. And that I'm afraid is not occurring, where it's making the situation worse, and it's not creating a better situation for Israel in this. I think Israel has to remember that at the end of all of this, they have to live in this neighborhood. They have to live with the Palestinians, as their neighbors. And so, the conduct of this, while there have been I think some military progress in this, overall strategically has not gone as well as I think they or anybody else had hoped here, and it's likely to continue to grind on for some time, I think.
What if we move a bit to the Gulf? I mean, what do you think of what's happening in the Red Sea? I mean, the Houthis are targeting the world trade routes. I mean, we see every now and then the Americans and the Brits are retaliating and targeting the Houthis in Yemen. So how do you see the military fight in the Red Sea?
Well, I think what the Houthis are doing, I mean, this is tantamount to maritime terrorism or economic terrorism. They have used their capabilities to go after ships that are just transiting international waters, as they always have, and they've as a result of this, they've completely changed the way that the commercial world has to move goods around the region, and they've tried to create a new norm in this. So I mean, I think this is extraordinarily, and it's extraordinarily bad, and it has to be addressed. The United States and a few other countries, the UK in particular, have stepped up and have taken some action to begin to limit this, but I think there's more that has to be done. My belief is that we cannot allow a new norm to be established, that it's okay for ships just to go around the the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of the African continent and then come back into the region. I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think we can allow any organization or really nation to just shut down international waterways because they see it as in their interests.
What else could be done? What
I'm
else?
sorry?
What else? What more could be done?
Well, what more can be done is that we have to more effectively go after Iran and their facilitation routes into this. We need to cut off the supply. We have to more aggressively go after the supplies that and the stockpiles that the Houthis have, and the combination of both of those things will hopefully begin to limit their ability to have some impact on this. And we've got to make sure that we've got to build more of a coalition of partners in the region who are going to help provide security. And there's not a lot. There's not many Gulf countries besides Bahrain who has actually stepped up and provided some assistance to this effort. So we've got a variety of things that have to be done here. These are difficult things, but they're necessary things to preserve a fundamental right of freedom of commerce, of freedom of navigation through international waters. This is foundational, I think, and our inability to turn this around, I think, is going to be a long-term problem for us.
As you said, Mr. Votelli, the Americans formed a coalition to save the maritime routes, but just one Gulf state joined this coalition, I think Bahrain. I mean, the other Gulf states did not join. What do you think? Why didn't they join?
Well, I really can't explain that, and I'm actually a little bit disappointed by that. All of them are going to see the impacts of this. Certainly, Saudi Arabia has ports along the Red Sea. Egypt, of course, is very dependent upon ships moving through the Suez Canal as a major generator of revenue for their economy. Jordan is impacted as well. I mean, we're seeing the decrease in the delivery of humanitarian supplies to the Sudan, where they are desperately needed, and that's exacerbating a horrible situation here. So I really can't explain why. I think perhaps they're waiting to see how this is resolved, or maybe they are using this as a way to demonstrate their support for the Palestinians in this. I really can't explain why exactly they are doing it, but I think it's to their own detriment. They are going to feel the long-term impacts. It's not necessarily the United States that's going to feel the impacts. It's going to be the countries in the region that are going to feel the impacts. And so it is in their interest I think, to be a part of this effort and help solve the problem.
What about, we read a lot of reports about potential American-Saudi defense deal or defense pact. What do you think? What do we know about it? What do you think of this?
Yeah, I think those are important things. I think the United States should have strong defense and diplomatic ties with all of our countries in the region. I mean, this has been an area that has historically been important to us. It's important to us now. It'll be important to us in the future. We have vital interests here that must be defended, and so having good relationships and partnerships and arrangements with our partners in the region, I think, is important. And I think that starts with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the kind of the leader of the Sunni Muslim world, and of course, the significance that it plays in Islam is a critical, important partner in this. And so, having a good relationship and a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia is not only in their interest; it's in our interest. And so, I'm very, very supportive of that.
But you were the leader of CENTCOM, but as we all know, the Americans have shifted their focus towards China. But at the same time, some Arab countries are complaining. The Americans are not really investing a lot of assets in the Gulf and the region. So, do you think the Americans can do both? Can really focus on China, but at the same time they can still doing good in the Gulf?
I do. I do. I think the United States military is big enough. I think we spend enough money. I think that we have interests in both areas that we can do both. We don't have to have tens of thousands of troops and dozens of ships in the region. But what we need to have is we need to have a sustainable military presence that's backed up by our strong diplomatic efforts, that's backed up by good informational efforts, and is encourages American investment and economic prowess in the region. I think the combination of all of these things, I think, is very, very important. The presence of small groups of troops or some ships at critical locations, I think, goes a long way, and it helps encourage our partners. So we don't have to have the same amount of troops that we've had for a long period of time. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think the situation calls for that, but there we can have a smaller but a more sustainable level of commitment to the region that would protect our interests and demonstrate our support for our partners.
You are hopeful that the defense pact would be signed between the Saudis and the Americans?
I hope so. I hope that we will move forward. I think, again, I think it's in our interest to do this, and I hope that we will. I hope that we will move forward on it, and I hope that that will become a platform upon which we can continue at some particular point to normalize relationships between Israel and the other countries of the region. I actually see this as an important thing as well. And before October 7th, there was actually a lot of effort going on. And having just returned from the region and visited several countries, I can tell you, I think they see the advantage of that, the power and a good relationships between Israel and countries of the region, and between the United States is a key part of that. So I think this is in the mutual interests of the region.
But as you know, sir, I think some Arab countries, and in particular Saudi Arabia, they're saying at least we need to see ceasefire in Gaza, and we need to see a pathway towards a Palestinian state, right? I think they're expecting some positive move on the Palestinian issue before we address the normalization issue. If I'm not
mistaken. I think that's understandable from those countries, but I also think it's important that what is coming from Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries is more than just rhetoric. They have to be willing to put resources into this. There will be a massive reconstruction effort that will need to be done for Gaza. The countries of the region will have to step forward in that, and Saudi Arabia among them. There may be the need for international forces in Gaza at some particular point, because the Israelis it won't be in their interest to try to occupy it. It won't be in the Palestinians' interest for them. So there may be the need for an international force that can't just be Americans and other Western countries. It has to be countries of the region. So it is important that I get that. I understand the point that's being made there, but you have to say and do, not just say. You have to the rhetoric has to be matched with actions on the ground when appropriate.
I know you're very busy, so just two more questions. One was, because you work on Iraq and you work on Syria. I mean, you visited Syria many times. Of course, you visited Iraq many times. And we know Mr. Soudani, the Prime Minister of Iraq, was in Washington recently. And we know that there was a lot of talk about a new kind of relations between America and Iraq, whether Sudan would be able to balance between Iran and America and Iraq. What is your view on this?
Well, my view, I think, is pretty clear here. I think Iraq is an extraordinarily geostrategically important country in the region. They sit right between kind of the Sunni Shia divide. They sit at the head of the Gulf. They bump up against Asia in terms of Turkey and other things like this. So it's an incredibly important location here. And I think it's in the interest of the United States to have a good relationship, a good enduring relationship with the Iraqi government and with the Iraqi military. And again, this doesn't have to be huge numbers of troops on the ground. Small teams positioned at the right place can really help preserve the professionalism of the Iraqi defense forces, and I think can be a good bulwark against an expansionist Iran in the region, and an alternative there. I think the Iraqis are more nationalistic than most people appreciate. They look at Iraq first. They don't want to be a country that is being fought over all the time. They have a very educated and smart population. They have a lot of extraordinarily high amount of potential. So I think a strong relationship with Iraq is very much in our interest, and I hope that we are able to preserve something despite the incredible pressure that's being put on Mr. Soudani.
And as you said, the Iranians keep testing, pressuring the Americans and the Iraqi government to push the Americans out from Iran.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it would be a mistake on the American side for us to think that we can pull away from this. We've done this before, and it did not turn out well. So, I think one of the things we have to think about is sustaining our efforts and thinking longer term rather than shorter term in terms of this. Iraq is an important country in the region and will be in the future, and it's important for us to have a good relationship with them.
Just like next to Iraq is northeast of Syria. I know you are a big supporter of SDF. I personally know Mazloum very well since many years, and I know like in 2019 you were very much against the Trump decision to pull out from northeast of Syria. So now we are the year of election in America. I mean, we don't know who's going to be elected. Maybe Trump will be re-elected or Biden will be re-elected. So I mean, how much, once again, are you concerned that maybe, even I think some American officials told Mazloum several times that we're not staying here forever, northeast of Syria. Do you think the American troops will stay in Syria for forever? B, how the American withdrawal will affect the fight against ISIS?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can answer that we'll be there forever, but I think we have to make a long-term commitment to this, and we don't have a huge number of troops, just a few hundred on the ground there. I think that's very sustainable. We're not absorbing casualties as a result of this. We're able to defend ourselves, and at the same time, we're performing an important mission to support the SDF and keep the pressure on ISIS. And I think with the kind of the rise of ISIS, especially ISIS-K and potentially other branches of ISIS, I think it's in our interest to maintain this. I also think one of the most important things we could do that might allow us to actually bring our troops back is hopefully to help broker some kind of political solution that gives the Syrian and perhaps others who are associated with this, some kind of political outcome. This has been lacking in 2019 after our after our military success there. I mean, there was a strong hope that we would be able to move that into the political realm, and that's not been done yet. So I think we have to do that in order to withdraw our forces out of the region and provide some kind of confidence, some kind of a reliability for the Kurds that they will be an integral part of the Syrian landscape here and not be a persecuted population. This has been the long problem here. So military solutions are good, but they can be tiresome and they're expensive. We ultimately need to get to a political solution, and that I think is actually more difficult.
I hope so, because I'm Syrian. I hope there will be a political solution and to go back to Syria. But I think this is the last question. This is like, it's a bit more strategic. You were the commander of CENTCOM. I mean, you worked in the region, the Gulf, Middle East. And of course, now you sit in Washington. You talk to different officials. I mean, how do you see the strategic landscape in the whole world? I mean, the competition between China and America in terms of military perspective. How do you see the competition? How do you see the new world order? If there is any.
Well, I mean, my belief is I'm American, so I have a specific view on this, and it's mine, and I accept it and take accountability for it. But I actually think the world order that was put in place after World War II by the United States and a number of countries here has generally been positive, and it has led to growth and prosperity and the spread of democracy. And it hasn't been perfect. No system is perfect in terms of this. And I don't think it is a system that excludes China or others from being members of it. In fact, for many years, the United States has embraced relationship with China and is largely responsible for bringing China into the global economy. I mean, we've seen that as part of our interest, but now what we see is China attempting to rewrite the rules of the road here, so to speak, with all of this, which I think is concerning because we don't know what all of that where all of that will go. To that end, I mean, I think that's kind of what's at stake here. So to that end, I think it's important for the United States to double down on its advantages and its strengths and its partnerships around the world. And so that's why it's important. We just can't leave the Middle East. The relationships there are too important to us. And if we leave, then we will be replaced by China here. In many ways, China is already here competing with us, and I think it's very, very important that we continue to double down on these relationships. As I mentioned to you, I was just in the region, and this topic came up, and in all cases, I mean, they acknowledge the significant trade partner that China is, but they also acknowledge the overriding importance of having a relationship with the United States. So I think we have to double down on this, and we have to pay attention to not only our military edge and our technology edge, but we also have to pay attention to our diplomatic edge, our political edge in terms of this, and have good partners. One of the things the United States has been doing in the Indo-Pacific has been pursuing good relationships with people out there, with countries like Japan and Korea, who are longtime partners, but also with Vietnam, who's a former adversary, but now a good friend and partner to us. Certainly with Australia, with a variety of other countries, the Philippines, for example, we have a renewed relationship with them. This is a good example of how we do this. We need to translate that now to the Middle East as well, and make sure these good relationships we've had with Jordan, Egypt, list all the countries, go right on down the Gulf there, we need to make sure those are positive and good relationships. It doesn't mean that we will agree on everything. That's not what friends do. They don't agree on everything, but they have mechanisms by which they can work through difficulties, and we have to do that, and we have to demonstrate our commitment to the region. It's in our interests. It's in the region's interest, and it's in the global community's interest, I believe.
This is really the last question, but just to follow up question, as you said, I mean the world order that was created after the Second World War and led by the U.S. and lasted for more than 7 decades. Now we're being tested, challenged by the Russians, with the Chinese, and the Russians and the Chinese will keep testing the Americans, will keep trying to dismantle this world order. And as you said, the Americans have succeeded to revive old alliances around China, or to build new alliances, but we don't see that in the Middle East or the Gulf, right? But I mean, I know what you said, but do you feel that the decision makers in Washington now, they are aware of the fact of copying their behavior in the China, around China, just in the Gulf? Do you see that there's awareness of that?
I do. Having talked to some of our diplomats in the region here, I do think that they are very aware of the situation at hand and understand what the United States needs to do and what it needs to not do. as we move forward. I'm very confident in our diplomatic corps here. The ambassadors that I've just spent some time with, I think, are extraordinary. They are great servants to our country, and I think they are people that are dedicated to the regions and the places where they serve, and they're trying to do the very best to bring balance to that. So I think there is an understanding of that. I think what the challenge for the United States is making choices here. We have, as a result of our actions over the last 20, 25 years in the global war on terrorism, China has risen, and now they're in a position where they actually are challenging us in areas where we've had dominance, and it isn't that China can't do that. It's that some of the methods by which China is pursuing this have very significant impacts, whether it's through debt traps, or whether it's through political isolation, or whether it's through suppression, or whether it's through aggression, as we see against Taiwan. That's the choices that people have here, whether we do this. I mean, you could say the same thing about Russia. I mean, look at what Russia has done in Ukraine, and the whole argument that Mr. Putin has made about why he needed to go in there is ridiculous on all of its supposed merits. And this is the choice that we have. He is actually trying to regress and move back to something, trying to move something back to something more akin to the Soviet Union, which I think everyone would agree was a failure in terms of this. So these are the choices that we have. And, for the United States, in order to confront a variety of threats, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's North Korea, whether it's the threat of violent extremist organizations, or Iran, we're having to make very, very difficult choices. And again, we have challenges at home here as well that we have to take care of. We have a serious problem on our own southwest border with migration. So, I mean, there are difficult choices out there. I don't minimize any of this, but I think it's important for our leaders to try to figure out the balance in all of this. And that's what I think we, as American citizens, we expect them to do.
You are confident America can make it, can do it.
I am, Ibrahim, I am always confident in America, that in the end, America will do the right thing. And I hope that people in the region will respect that as well. I know sometimes it can be frustrating to deal with Americans, but in the end, I think Americans always do the right thing.
Fascinating. Of course, we can talk forever, but I'm not going to take more out of your time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Votel. Really, thank you so much for taking the time and do this interview with us in Al Majalla. Thank you so much.